Good evening, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the virtual Bible study session hosted by the Youth Ministry of Greater Mount Nebo AME Church. My name is Reverend Shania Dillard, and I'm excited about sharing a word from the Lord with you on tonight. Our text will be Luke chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. Again, that is Luke chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. And in the NRSV version, it reads this way. On another Sabbath, he entered the synagogue and taught, and there was a man there whose right hand was withered. The scribes and the Pharisees watched him to see whether he would cure on the Sabbath, so that they might find an accusation against him. Even though he knew what they were thinking, he said to the man who had the withered hand, "Come and stand here." He got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, "I ask you, is it lawful to do good or to do harm on the Sabbath, to save life or to destroy it?" After looking around at all of them, he said to him, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand was restored. But they were filled with fury and discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. Again, that was Luke chapter 6, verses 6 through 11. And just for a little bit of time, I like to talk about obedience tonight. I know we don't really seem to like that word much, but it's important. And I believe this text shows us just a little bit of why it's important. And where we find ourselves in the text is that Jesus had entered into a synagogue in order to teach, which is what he did. And there was a man who was right there when Jesus arrived, and his right hand was withered. So one of the things that I noticed in this is that Jesus has a way of showing up right where we are. Like, it's not always a case where we have to go searching for Jesus or trying to hunt him down. But in this case, Jesus showed up right where this man was. And whether Jesus knew this man was present or not, or whether or not this man knew that Jesus was going to come by to the synagogue on that particular day or not, he was at the right place at the right time. And so we're definitely grateful for that, even that on tonight. And the text goes on to talk about the scribes and the Pharisees. Now, the scribes and Pharisees were people who didn't necessarily agree with anybody in the town saying that they were the Messiah or that they were greater than whomever was in charge or in place. And so Jesus was the self-proclaimed Son of the living God, and was the Messiah, the soon coming King. And the scribes and the Pharisees didn't like it much. And so they had heard about Jesus doing different things around town. And so they said, well, let's just see if he's going to heal on a Sabbath, because it was a law or a rule in place at that time where it was unlawful or against the law to heal or to perform miracles as it were on the Sabbath day. And so to see if they were basically trying to trap Jesus, right? They were basically trying to see if Jesus was going to do what was against the law on that particular day. And so they kept a watchful eye on him. They watched his every move. They watched whatever he did. They followed him wherever he walked. They looked to see what he was doing at all times and kept an eye on him at all times. And so, of course, there's this man who's sitting in this synagogue, and his hand is jacked up, right? And so the scribes and the Pharisees, they watched to see if Jesus was going to do anything. And, Jesus, of course, already knew what they were thinking in their mind, because he knows everything at all times. So he already knew what they was thinking. He addressed the man. Now, watch this now. Jesus gave the man instructions, right? Jesus specifically told him exactly what to do. And it's important that we do exactly what Jesus says. It's right there in verse 8, because he said, even though he knew what the Pharisees and the scribes were thinking, he said to the man, "Come and stand here." Right. So that was the first set of instructions that Jesus gave the man. He told him to come and to stand here. And that's in verse 8. And then the man did exactly what Jesus said. Now, the man had absolutely no idea what Jesus was doing. Had no idea what Jesus's premise was for why he even told him to stand up, to come stand wherever he asked him to stand. But the man, either he knew something or he figured, what harm could it be to follow this man's simple instructions? And so he got up and he stood exactly where Jesus asked him to stand. Then Jesus asked the question. He asked the Pharisees and the scribes. He said, is it lawful to do good or to do harm, to save a life or to destroy it? Of course, they're Pharisees. They didn't know how to answer that question, in which they didn't. And so everybody's looking around and trying to figure out, what's going on, what's going to happen next. So then Jesus gives the man a second set of instructions. Jesus said, stretch out your hand. And so the man, once again, for the second time in this text, he did exactly what Jesus said, and he stretched out his hand. And what happens next is great. It says that after he stretched his hand out, his withered hand then became restored and looked exactly like the other one did. And what Jesus was saying to me, or what God has been showing me, is that it's so important to obey, because obedience then yields the very things that we are indeed looking for from God. That when we obey and we follow simple instructions of those who have been placed in charge or authority over us, whether it be our parents, our guardians, our teachers, that we ought to obey their instructions, because it could be some benefits to following directions and following the rules. And so this man could have just stayed in his seat and said, I don't know you, bro. I ain't about to do what you asked me to do. And the man could have very easily not stretched his hand out. But the fact of the matter is, he had just enough sense and enough trust in that moment to move and to stand where Jesus asked him to stand, and to also stretch his hand out. Now, here's the thing that I love about this text. Jesus never touched the man. I just paused for a minute just so you can think about it for yourselves, even as you go back and read this text. Jesus never touched him. Jesus never laid hands on him. A lot of times in biblical text, you'll see where Jesus did miracles by spitting in the dirt. He touched somebody's eyes. Whatever the case may be. In this particular instance, it wasn't the fact that Jesus touched him that allowed him to be healed. It was his obedience to Christ that allowed him to be healed. And here's the other thing that I noticed about the scribes and the Pharisees, because of course the last verse 11 said they were mad. They were in their feelings, trying to figure out, well, what do we need to do to Jesus? And they were so caught up and so focused on proving that Jesus wasn't Jesus, or disproving who he said he was, that they missed the fact that the manifestation of the miracle didn't happen because Jesus actually did anything. It happened because the guy obeyed. That was it. Jesus never laid a finger. So they can't even prove that Jesus performed the miracle. They can't even prove that Jesus healed the man on the Sabbath, because Jesus never touched him. The man literally, the only thing he did was followed Jesus's directions. That was it. His healing came because he trusted God enough to just do what he said. And I know some of us, we struggle with this word obedience. And I'm sure, much like me, when I was your age, I know I heard so many times coming out of the mouth of my parents, obedience is better than sacrifice. And I'm sure your parents are saying that to you too. But believe me, they're not just saying it. It's in the Bible too. If you would just flip back over to the Old Testament and go to 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 22, Samuel then is saying it's better to obey than it is to sacrifice. And so your parents are not making it up, guys. It is better to obey. It is better to do what you're being told. It is better to do what you're being asked to do, because there are benefits to obeying. I remember plenty of times, when we had chores growing up, parents would say, well, if you clean the kitchen or make the bed or dust the tables or vacuum the floor, we call those chores. And at that time, sometimes we got an allowance. Sometimes you get a certain amount of money for doing the things that you've been asked to do. And so there, even in that case, reaping the benefits of an allowance is still a benefit of then obeying, right? And so there are a lot of benefits to following directions and doing what you're asked to do. I remember one time when I was younger, I wanted to go to a party, and everything in me was like, yeah, I want to go because all my friends were going and I wanted to go, but mom was like, no. And so what I found and what I learned was that same party that I was going to go to, had I had gone, there was a big fight and situation that happened, and there was a lot going on that I didn't need to be a part of. But because I didn't go and I obeyed, that my life very well could have just been spared that night because I obeyed and chose not to go. And so not every time that your parents tell you no, are they trying to keep you from having fun. Sometimes it literally could mean the difference between life and death for you. And so all I want to convey to you is that it is better to be obedient than it is to sacrifice. It is better to follow what you know to be true. It is better to be obedient and do what Jesus has asked you to do, because your healing is contingent upon your obedience. Your deliverance is contingent upon your ability to obey. So whatever it is you're looking for, maybe it may not be something tangible that you're looking for from your parents. Maybe you yourself have been looking for something from God, or asking or praying for something in particular. But I just wanted to challenge you in your thinking a little bit on tonight, just so you can start thinking a little differently, to think that maybe the very thing you're asking for, or the very thing you're looking for, is on the other side of you being able to follow directions. It's on the other side of you being able to be obedient. It's on the other side of you simply doing what's asked of you, right? And so I will that you would take hold of this text, Luke 6:6-11. It's in also in, I believe, in Mark as well. But take hold of this text, reread it again, and maybe see where there may be some other things that you see that may even apply to you in your own personal life. But the overall bottom line message for tonight is that there are benefits to being obedient. And so I will that you would just pray with me for just a moment regarding being obedient. God, we thank you just for this brief lesson on tonight about being obedient and how there are benefits to obeying. God, we're asking that you will grant us all the grace necessary to follow directions. Oh God, to yield the instructions of those who are in place, who have been placed in authority over us. Oh God, not just so that it could spare our lives or so that we can have benefits of it, but just because, God, we love you, oh God, and because we love the ones that are over us, oh God, and the ones that are helping to raise us and take care of us, God. God, help us to want to do what's right, oh God, even when what's doing wrong is what's popular. God, help us to get to the place, oh God, where we understand what it means to obey, oh God, and even what some of those sacrifices might even look like should we choose not to obey. God, I'm asking that you would just help us to understand, oh God, that just like the man with the withered hand was healed on that particular day simply because he obeyed the voice of Jesus, God. Help us to listen for your voice more than we look for your hand. Help us to get to the place where we know what your voice sounds like, oh God. So much so, God, where we'll commune with you, God, just so that we can hear what your voice sounds like and not always only want to commune with you because we're looking for something from you. God, this is our prayer on tonight, and God will be forever careful to give your name glory, honor, and praise. In Jesus' name, amen. Listen, if you have any questions, comments, want to give some feedback about this, you can send an email to cdillard@gmnebo.org. It's also in the description of this particular video. And we look forward to sharing with you again 2 Tuesdays from today, on the 4th Tuesday of October, as this virtual Bible study will take place on 2nd and 4th Tuesdays. Until next time, be blessed.